Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here with my guest, Joe Perello. Today's topic, lessons learned as the first ever CMO of New York City under Michael Bloomberg. Joe started his career in credit cards at MBNA, where he launched the NFL Visa card. He was also the VP of marketing for the New York Yankees, worked on David Bowie's business, and then became New York City's first ever CMO in 2003. He's gone on to found a digital ad agency and recently a creator marketing technology platform called Props, P-R-O-P-S, where he serves as the CEO. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Mike. Great to see you. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. First question, let's focus on that New York job, which I think is going to be super interesting to everybody. The first ever CMO, obviously a political situation, no structure, a clean slate. Tell us how this job even came about and how you approached it. And for our listeners, full disclosure, Joe and I met at the inaugural Marketing 50 a long time ago, and we've kept in touch since. And if you're looking for New York recommendations, Joe would be one of your best bets. So, yes. Joe, let's talk about how this job got going.
Yeah, again, thank you, Mike, for having me. So I was working for the Yankees for 3-4 years and had a great run. And I really never lost the entrepreneurial dream that I had, that I never really executed on at that point. I worked for a big bank. Then I worked for the Yankees, and I said, you know what, let me try my hand at this. Started with David Bowie and built the first online fan club. And the dream was to go public, right, and never work again and all that stuff. And then the stock market tanked, and I was like, oh, I guess I got to keep working. And started my own sports marketing shop. And started to get clients, and there was one client that I really wanted to get because I knew I could deliver for them, and it was Modell's Sporting Goods, right? Regional sporting good retailer here in the city, and was berating Mitchell Modell. Just, why aren't you hiring me? I'm going to deliver for you. And one day I called him up and I said, look, I'm either going to work for you or I'm going to work for your competitor, the Sports Authority. So which one is it going to be? And he acquiesced and he hired me. And we started to do great work together. And a month into it, he calls me up and says, Joe, I got a great job for you. I was like, you just hired me. Are you trying to get rid of me that bad?
Yeah.
He said, no, Mike Bloomberg is creating the first chief marketing officer of the city of New York. He called me up. He asked me who it should be. And I told him it should be you. I didn't ask. I just told him. So you need to go and meet their team because you're going to be the next CMO as long as you don't screw it up.
Well, out of the blue, this just comes over the transom. It just comes over the transom. It's like, like all CMO jobs. And, hey, come on, be the CMO of New York City. So you obviously go meet, and then what happens?
I meet with Dan Doctoroff, who was a deputy mayor at the time. If you know Dan came up with the idea to bring the Olympics to New York City. Met with him. We had a great conversation. I think he really liked all the work that I had done at the Yankees. There was a lot of skills that I brought to the table. And also, I was available. I wouldn't say I was available. I mean, I had to sort of like cut down my fur, but this was so interesting.
We're gonna go with available. We're gonna go
with available. So it was so interesting to me because after 9/11 happened, right? I watched it, right? So many stories like me. I had my office on 7th Avenue, and I saw the whole thing from the roof. Like, it affected me to my core. Like, that's not a new story. And in the aftermath, I'm a marketing guy. Like, what can I do? I don't have a ferry system. I can't help the I can't help the guys down there. I can't dig. Like, I felt so helpless. And then I met Dan, Dr. Off, and he had this vision, right, to remake New York City, and the Olympics were part of it. And marketing was a central role. And I was like, oh my God, I could actually add value here as a marketing person. So there wasn't a lot of structure around it. They're like, look, we could be marketing New York City better. We should be more coordinated. What do you think?
So when we are talking about job specs and setting expectations, this would be the cleanest sheet of paper possible, which is we just have this idea. So you come in, that means you have to create everything, the mission for marketing, the connection to everything, the team, everything. How do you go about that?
So it took me maybe like a week or two to sort of figure it out. And it was actually after I met with Dan, and then he said, okay, I want you to meet the mayor. I sat down with Mike Bloomberg. And then after that meeting, I came up with the idea to just treat it like a league, like a sports league. So sports leagues, they have.
Hey, I can't let this go. I want to come back to this in a minute, but it takes you 1 week. You don't hire anybody. You just think this up and you say,
no.
I'm going to make this. I didn't hire
anyone.
I'm going to make this.
I wasn't even hired yet.
Yeah.
I wasn't even hired yet.
Oh, how did you come up with this idea? We're going to make it like a sports league. Is that because of the Yankees thing, or? I
had experience with the NFL doing the credit card. So I really got to know it was called NFL Enterprises then. And I really understood, I listened and understood all their businesses. They have, obviously, television rights is a big part of it. Events, intellectual property, licensing, sponsorship, right? They have these core business drivers. And then at the Yankees, I learned it from the baseball side, right? So baseball centralizes all these rights together. They can, if they centralize it together and apply rules around the rights and the brand, then you can generate revenue and you can deliver value to brands by delivering that revenue. So delivering that value. So I was like, look, New York City is a brand. It's an amazing brand, right? It went through some rough times in the 70s, like in the 80s, right? When Ford said drop dead. But it is a brand that was created largely through film, television, theater, poetry, right? It wasn't created through commercial brand building. Mm-hmm. So you could say is really more organic, right, of a brand. The idea of New York City, arguably most of the people that consume media understand what New York City is. So it's a great brand. But what was missing? Number one is there was no intellectual property that was protected. There was a Parks logo. There was an FDNY logo. There was a police department logo. There was no central brand to govern the city as a whole. So there was no sort of central guidelines to create and protect a brand. That was step one. Step one is, okay, let's protect New York City. Let's create a logo that was identified still being used today, and then create new brands around that, right? So that's the equivalent of the Giants, the Jets, the Yankees, right? They've all got intellectual property. It's all protected. And then they have deals with licensing to make money on that logo. We created that in New York City. We had Target as our number one vendor.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, we even created a brand for sanitation.
Yeah.
And protected it. We had great attorneys at the city, core council, amazing people, guys who created Major League Soccer, right? Were the corporation counsel for the city of New York. So they understood all of this.
But you create all these brands. But so you create all these brands, you still have to get people to pay for them. So because this is a complete rethink of a city, really. And so, I mean, it's one thing to create the brands. It's another thing to get money for them, sponsorship rights. How did you do that?
So the licensing was actually a small part of it. It got a lot of attention because everyone was like, oh, they're finally going to make money on the NYPD stuff. So we did that.
Yeah.
Then we also created a series of principles around how we engage with corporate sponsors. And in the past, like every other city, right? If the city wants to engage with a brand or corporations. They're essentially asking for a handout, right? They're like, hey, we need this thing solved in the city, and the taxpayers can't afford it, and we need you to donate money to restore the monuments, right? Or do all the different things. So number one is we were like, look, we're not just going to ask for a handout. We're going to deliver you value in the same way that a league delivers you value. And the way the league delivers a value to a sponsor is two things. They're associated with football, which is amazing, and you can reach people, right? Without reaching people, it's a handout.
Yeah.
With reaching people, it becomes a major part of your marketing plan. And that is what our goal was. We want a partnership with New York City to be a major part of your marketing plan. So what do we have to deliver? We don't have television. We don't have games. Like, we don't have TV. We have the Super Bowl of outdoor media, right? 3,500 bus stop shelters, 8,000 cabs, okay? 11,000 phone kiosks, right? All in New York City, all sort of being tripped over and not leveraged, right, by the city itself. So to sum it all up, we put all that together. We got 20% of that for the city, and we carved it up and delivered it to our corporate partners according to the solution that they solved. So
give me a good example. Like you mentioned sanitation. You mentioned the
Well, the first big one we did, the first really big one we did was with Snapple. Okay, Snapple was at the time still an independent brand.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, pretty much still an independent brand.
Yeah, before they got bought. Yeah,
before they got bought. Born in Brooklyn. Okay, grown in New York, right? And a great brand and doing great at the time. So we decided we're going to take soda out of the schools. They were selling soda in the schools, like it's unheard of. But we said we're going to take the soda out. We're going to put in water and apple juice. Snapple's in the apple juice business. We're going to do that. We centralized all that together, just like you would in a stadium, right? Just like you do a deal in the stadium for Coke or Pepsi. Did the same thing. Sold it to Snapple for $166 million.
Holy
okay, now Snapple, yes. Snapple had the obligation, just like Visa does at the NFL, to promote New York.
Yeah.
Right. So we took that same idea. Okay, look, you got to pay us cash, and you've got to make sure that you promote New York City through your own efforts. You want to promote the association. We use the cash, some of the cash, to create the middle school sports program in the city, which was suffering, as you can imagine. Middle school sports, right? It's like middle school is just everyone ignores middle school because it's a disaster. Middle school sports, real big problem in the city. So we used the money from Snapple, created the middle school sports program, and we delivered Snapple real value, right? So they got all these billboards all around the city. It did cost them anything, but we packaged it into our deal just like Major League Baseball, just like NFL, just like you would. We followed the same playbook. And the brands were like, I can't believe that this is available to me. Like, how do you do this? Now, there are downsides to this too, Mike. One is there are losers, right? Because you're doing this very publicly. You're doing this public RFP.
In the most political possible environment there is.
Yes. So Snapple wins and you got to do it with an RFP, right? You can't, it wasn't like I was taking phone calls and like wheeling dealing here. You got to do it in the RFP method. And so Snapple comes in, Coke didn't pitch, Pepsi did, and they lost. This is all public, right? So I'm not really disclosing anything. They lost and they were embarrassed because they're in Armonk, New York. They consider themselves a New Yorker, but we're like, that's not New York. That's Westchester. We're talking about New York here.
Spoken like a true New York.
Let's be really clear. So what happens is you're losers, and the losers are angry, and it's not like they're like, oh, okay, we'll talk to you next time. They funded the mayor's opponent's mayoral campaign.
Wow.
Who was the comptroller, Bill Thompson, right? Well known. Actually, he's a really good guy. We've met on a few occasions, but Pepsi was like, we're going to fund this campaign because these guys kicked us out of the school. So that was a new experience for me. Is instead of just calling the CEO, like, hey, listen, you didn't win this time. We're going to do another category. I read about it.
That's right.
Post the next day, and they're like, "Who is this guy? Get him out of here. He's crooked."
So how do you? So you're selling these sponsorships for, but it's boatloads of money. You're pouring it back into the city. How do you measure success? And then how do you, over time, like, so you got this political environment. I'm sure a bunch of people are not always happy with what you're doing, in addition to the people that don't win the sponsorships in the administration. Yeah. How do you set up the measures? How do you track this? How do you manage all the politics around that?
Yeah, well, that's a lot of questions there. So let me talk about measurement.
It's a lot. I'm giving you a lot to work with, Joe.
Measurement first is Bloomberg, right? Billionaire businessman, number one, we're cash flow positive, right? So we are a revenue generator for the city. So the broader mission behind NYC marketing is let's generate revenue in new ways, right? Let's be clever and use the assets that are available to us to help the city and generate revenue so we can funnel that back into getting 50 million people to come to New York City, right? So the whole mission was to get more tourists there and come up with a new way to do it. So number one was cash. Number two was how many agencies did we actually impact, right? So Snapple helped the Department of Education. The History Channel helped the Parks Department and Landmark Preservation, right? We had Chevy and Crisco. They helped the New York City big events bring in the Country Music Awards. And actually at the time, the Republican National Convention. So we measured how much money, media, and in-kind we delivered to every agency. We ended up impacting 35 different agencies, right, over the first 3 years in our business. Then we measured media. How much media did our partners spend promoting New York City outside of New York? You always see these commercials, the CVB commercials of like the governor talking about, and they're pitching it to New Yorkers. They're like, we're already here.
Yeah, I love New York because I live there. So yeah,
we're already here. We you need to be spending that in Dusseldorf and Madrid, and Ireland and Kansas City, and not in New York City. So all the deals that we put together, all of our partners had to spend money outside of New York City to get people to come in. So those are essentially the three big ways that we measured our impact. Cash, how many agencies did we affect positively? And then how much did people talk about us outside of New York?
And then there must have been some people that weren't happy with this. It's a political environment, or
half the people were
half the people. How do you manage that? Because one of the things about CMO Confidential is talking about managing the politics and your most active consumers are usually in your company. In this case, your most active consumers are not only in the administration or in the wannabe administration, they're also sitting there getting a good deal or not if they're one of the entities. How do you manage all the politics around that? Any tips for our listeners?
Yeah. So I think this applies to, the private sector too. Number one is it's all manageable if you report to people who get it, who understand it's not a nice path upwards. There are bumps along the way and you hit roadblocks and you get stymied and you got to come back. And Mike Bloomberg and Dan Doctor, they were both, already hugely successful in life and in business. And, when Pepsi came after our group and me personally, they were like, don't worry about it, Joe. Look, it happens. We got your back. Like, they really gave me a lot of support. And I was like, well, I don't have $1 billion in the bank. So I still need a job after this.
Yeah.
So it feels nice, but what else is there? Anyway, you gotta have, if you report to a great CEO, and I'll say Mike and Dan were the CEOs, and they have your back, it's imminently more easy to manage this, especially in a place where I mean, Mike, the comptroller of the city of New York is essentially like the CFO,
Right.
and they're elected. So it's like the CFO wants the CEO's job, and he's going to single out this sort of newfangled marketing guy to see if he can make a name for himself, and get elected. So you had to be able to just say, okay, this is not reality, right? This is all sort of going to pass. People are going to say stuff. It's not that big of a deal. And if your bosses have your back, you can get through it all.
So
Right.
I'm going to shorthand this and say what you're saying is, as long in a situation like this, which is obviously about as political as you're going to get, if your boss has your back, it's go forward and recognize that nearly 50% of the people are going to be pissed off 50 all the time. And just have to do what you think is right and try and be consistent and principled. Is that fair?
Okay. What you said, always do what you think is right, is absolutely 100% the way to do it. And so if you're entering into a job as high profile as a chief marketing officer, there really only is one consideration to make. That's assuming you like the product and you care about the category, you like all that. Who am I working for? That's the only thing to consider, because no matter what, you're going to have ups and downs in every single job, right? And there's going to be good quarters, there's going to be bad quarters. You're going to be the hero, you're going to be the GOAT. And I mean the GOAT in the bad way.
Yes.
If you have a great relationship with the CEO or the COO or the CFO or all three of them, and they understand marketing, and that marketing is this imperfect science no matter what anyone says to you, and they trust you, and you trust each other, then you will have I think you'll have a successful endeavor.
So let's take this and if you're a first-time CMO and you're either interviewing or just starting the job, you've just laid out the principles, and obviously you want someone who's got your back and shares your vision. What else would you put in people's heads to think about as they that first-time CMO job is sometimes not the easiest for very many people. What tips would you give them going forward? Like
That's a great question.
How do they set expectations? What do they do?
Yeah, because you go into a job and you want to put a win in the win column, right out of the gate. Wow, we got this person, we got this girl, we got this guy. They're already. It's like there's a real big desire to be like, hey, you guys made a good decision,
right?
And you want to build trust. I would refrain from sort of doing that too fast and assess your whole situation first. And the second most important thing, right? So who am I reporting to? That's number one. Second is, who can I rely on in my organization to tell me the truth? That is not their skill. Who can tell me the truth? Because in any marketing enterprise, there's always things that are working, and there's always the things that aren't. And it's really difficult to tell the difference between those two, and impossible if no one's really telling you the truth.
I totally agree with this. And a lot of people don't want to tell you the truth, and a lot of people don't want to admit it's not working. And if you can't get the truth somehow, a bunch of stuff that's not working will emerge as a giant squid and grab you and drag you underwater. You need to know where that thing is before it breaches the surface. So I think that is super good advice. Hey, let me flip over a little bit. So you found a tech platform, not an agency. You founded agencies before. You've now founded a tech platform. Why? What does that even mean? The props tech platform, and then what's the white space you see here that isn't covered by anything else?
Yeah. So I started an advertising agency after the city. I had two partners, and I loved it. It was exciting. This was probably 2009, nine-ish.
Yeah.
So the agency still had viability in my mind, and I shouldn't say that agencies have viability, but we were a small agency, right? Difficult to really make it as a small agency, and we did great. We had Nike, we had Lowe's Hotels, We had Michelle Obama as a client. We had HP. We did great. We had great clients, great client relationships, and the results of our clients were great. Like Lowe's had their best year ever. I'm not saying we made a dent in Nike's business, but we had great years. We could not have done a better job, Mike. Won awards. They could measure the results. And we started losing clients to tech platforms. We lost Lowe's hotels to, I think, Merkle.
Yeah.
Not another agency,
Yeah.
not some fancy schmancy, Droga 5. We lost it to Merkle. And it was that point when I said, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
I can't do any better than I did, right? Creative-wise, relationship-wise, results-wise. So this is not going to work. I sold my stake to my partners, and I was on the hunt for a new way to market. Literally, I said, there has to be another way to market. And I knew social media was important. I knew digital media was important. I sort of saw the effects of influencer marketing and coming in, and essentially started Props. And Props is the shortest way to explain it is it's storytelling as a service platform. Now, I came journalism. So I majored in journalism in college. And I always found that journalism was a horrible way to make money.
Yeah, horrible.
But if you could figure out how to sort of merge the credibility of journalism with the commercial need of advertising, then you could create something that could transform marketing. And really that's what Props does, is we're finding credible content creators, not influencers, right? These are real people who have real expertise in either dentistry or nutrition or road trips or camping or fly fishing or knitting, like whatever sort of expertise you need.
Or
Number two is,
in this case, you're going to put this on Props.
yes, or CMO.
You're going to talk about CMOing.
Exactly.
And right, how that works.
We find these, we have an A&R team, just like a record label, right? We stole this from a record label idea. We have this A&R team, and they're out there curating all these incredible.
You should explain what that acronym stands for to everybody, because you just threw it out there like
I know, A&R, Artist and Repertoire.
There we go. Yes, you just tossed that out there like, oh yeah, A&R TD. Oh, there, I got it. Yeah, you got it, everybody. All right. Yeah. So
yes, the A&R team. Come on,
you're curating like a label.
Yes, we're curating like a label. And all of these folks, as I like to say, your mom thinks these people are talented, right? That's the kind of talent they have. They're not dilettantes. And I'm not knocking the influencer game because it's growing. It's really important. These people are different. So number two is, this is apparently a massive shift in the businesses. We publish all their content on our client's website directly. Who have heard of that? It's on there. It's on their website. So they become the publisher. And then, as I described to you, we have this new way to sort of promote the content through the creator, and we use paid media to do that. And the combination of those three things essentially enables people to unlock audiences who ignore ads.
Got it.
And that has been the value of our platform for mostly direct-to-consumer brands, right? They're spending money in search. People are putting in, I need a tow truck, and they're going to get it. Otherwise, in order to unlock those audiences, you've got to present them with a story. You're not going to get them to your site unless you present them with a compelling story. And then you can advertise, to your heart's desire to them, and then they will convert. But unless you present them with a story made by someone who's credible, it's going to be very difficult to succeed in the digital landscape. That's what we're doing.
Thank you for that. We're almost to the end of the show, so I'm going to give you one shot here. You can tell a funny or give people practical advice that we haven't talked about so far, or tell us a funny story, anything you want before we close out the show.
Oh, the first advice, I've been talking about this a lot, is I feel bad for the new generation that's coming into the workforce, because they have a choice if they're going to go to the office or not. And I really feel like not going to the office is doing them a big disservice. is the value in developing your career is to be around not just your peers, which is helpful, but about other people like Mike Linton, who knows more about marketing than most of us are going to forget. He knows so much more. Like if you can be next to Mike, right, for 6 months.
Love having you on the show, by the way.
Listen, I mean, I'm being serious. Like if you could just overhear Mike Linton's conversations for 6 months, that's going to be worth 4 years of school. And I say the same thing. I mean, look, I'm no Mike Linton. I've been around the block a few times. I know what's happening. Like you should want to be in the same office as me and other people that are around me so that you can learn. It's very simple.
And you will also run into the IT folks or the CFO or anybody else, and you can have coffee with them, and you can build a relationship with them. I agree with this. So that's a practice.
Imagine that.
Is there a funny story that goes with this too? Is there any funny stories, or is there anything?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I'll tell you a funny story about. Let me see. Let me tell you a funny story about. So you're gonna have to edit this because I'm coming up with.
You don't know about that, Joe.
No, Mike. I'm coming up with all these stories. And I can't talk about any of them. So I'm not allowed.
What we will do, we're going to save this. We're going to save this for a second show. It's going to be Joe's funny stories.
Yes.
I think the practical advice is really important for people that if you want to be a big person in business, it's important to build the relationships and the other connections as much as you can. And the learning is multidimensional. So I think that's a super good lesson. And Joe, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And thanks to everybody for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple, and YouTube, which include what venture capital really thinks about marketing. Hint, a lot of times it doesn't. Is the CMO job headed for extinction? Why is marketing innovation so freaking hard? And a top executive recruiter talks about the CMO space. Thank you, Joe. And all of you marketers, be safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.
This episode of CMO Confidential is produced and sponsored by AdCom, one of the premier integrated marketing and advertising agencies. AdCom works with mid-market companies to create measurable returns. With 30-plus years experience, AdCom partners to lead innovative strategy, creative, media, and analytics for growth-oriented brands that want to differentiate themselves in a crowded field. Working in B2B, B2C, healthcare, financial services, transportation, building products, and consumer goods, AdCom leverages unique internal and external insights to create dynamic and lasting brands ready to maximize their market position. For more information, visit us at engageadcom.com.
Are you tired of the same old productivity hacks? Have you read the top 20 books on effectiveness, and yet your workdays and email inbox still causing anxiety, burnout, and even depression? Ready to learn the latest in brain-based modalities, techniques, and technologies to optimize your success and well-being? Welcome to the Focus to Evolve podcast, where we'll illuminate your path to spacious productivity and balanced thriving. Each week, we dive into deeply insightful and immediately impactful methods to help you become highly effective while promoting health, profitability, and well-being. Say goodbye to the trance of busyness and hello to your highest potential. It's time to discover a new way of accelerating your mission, growth, and purpose. Join us on the Focus to Evolve podcast and get ready to live your most joyful, productive, and fulfilling life.
Great careers are forged out of great relationships. Your success, whatever your field, relies and thrives on the support and insights of others. I'm Andy Lapata, an author and speaker on the power of professional relationships. In the Connected Leadership podcast, I have the privilege of interviewing people from around the world to understand the relationships that have made a difference on their journey and how their insights can help you. From Nobel Prize winners to Olympians, from NASA astronauts to peace campaigners, my guests have shared some captivating moments from their lives and careers. Combined with experts from leading universities, cutting-edge authors and giants of business, the Connected Leadership podcast aims to inspire, educate and entertain.